Hello folks. It seems that mathematicians have a strange theory on where numbers come from. I've been watching some Alex O'Connor videos. He's an excellent debater and thinker, and I enjoy watching him. But he really ought to be more critical, at least in this case. Viewing the mathematician Marcus de Sautoy, and this section is about where numbers come from. But it's riddled with paradox, and it's actually quite funny, so I thought I'd share it with you. It begins by saying that maths cannot contain paradoxes, but then he goes on to indulge in what is arguably the most archetypal of paradoxes, the idea that you can get something from nothing. So let's watch this first clip and see him say that.
Paradox of the set of all sets that don't contain themselves as members produce a paradox, and we're not meant to have paradoxes in mathematics. And
so he starts out well, but then he goes on to state that numbers come from nothing, which is an overt paradox. So let's watch the second clip.
So in set theory, if 1 is defined as the set containing nothing, what is 0 defined as?
the set of nothing, the empty set. So 0 is the empty set, which is nothingness.
And 1 is the set containing the empty set.
Yeah, so it's the set which contains nothingness. Exactly.
Gotcha. So it's not the set that contains nothing in the sense of having nothing in the set, but rather that
It's got some. No, exactly. It actually contains something. It contains this concept of nothingness. So it's got something in it, which is what's so interesting. So it therefore has one thing in it, which is it's got. So you start to get into kind of language which seems to contradict itself. But
yes, Marcus, it does sound like it's contradicting itself. He can't even bring himself to finish the sentence because it's so patently absurd. It's quite hilarious. So he's effectively saying that you can get something from nothing by wrapping it in an imaginary container. It feels a bit like a magic trick or a bit of sleight of hand, so I had to give it a bit of thought to try and discover how the trick works. So to summarise his argument, he's saying you take the concept of nothing, you wrap it in an imaginary container called a set, and call it the empty set, or set 0. Then you wrap that in another imaginary container, and we'll call it set 1. And then claim that set 1 now contains one thing, i.e. it contains the empty set, set 0. And that's where the number 1 comes from. Okay, clear? So the basic claim is that the empty set is a thing, and we are basically transforming nothing into something by putting it in a set. So just for clarity, a set is a collection of things. It's a group, a list, a category, or a container. And while I can see what he's getting at, this argument is fundamentally flawed. The main problem with Marcus's assertion is that there is no concept of sets, or collections, or categories of stuff included within the concept of nothing. These ideas have to be imposed from the outside. We have to impose the idea of sets onto the concept of nothing from the outside, from a world in which the idea of sets makes sense. Nothing doesn't include the idea of sets or collections, so that idea has to be introduced from somewhere else, i.e. from the world of things. So this argument is flawed because it relies on concepts that are introduced from the outside. To make it work, we have to add concepts that the concept of nothing does not contain or imply. In other words, Marcus is smuggling in the concept of something into the concept of nothing via the application of sets. And that's how this derivation is rationalised. But the concept of nothing does not lead to anything. Nothing can be derived from it. Nothing cannot become something by virtue of its own properties because it has none. Sets are not a neutral addition to the equation. They fundamentally change it. This process is not deriving numbers from 0, it's introducing them along with the concept of sets. So that's how the trick works. Basing any kind of derivation on a foundation of nothingness is bound to fail. It will always result in paradox. And the idea of nothing is intrinsically a paradox in itself. It's a useful idea, but it is intrinsically a paradox. It's the thing that doesn't exist, but by definition, a thing must exist. In order to be a thing, it must exist. If nothing existed, it would be something, and it wouldn't be nothing. That's a paradox, so obviously nothing cannot exist. And similarly, the universe itself cannot have come from nothing, because nothing can never have existed. If it existed, it wouldn't be nothing. Non-existence is what the concept of nothing means. You can't get existence from non-existence. Also, to be clear, Marcus isn't really starting out with literally nothing. He's starting out with the concept of nothing. But the concept of nothing isn't really the same thing as actual nothing. It's a thing. A concept is a thing. So the concept of nothing is not nothing, it's something. So it is a paradox in itself. So sets are basically containers, and containers are never truly empty. They always contain space, or at least they have the potential to expand. So a container must at least contain potential. And potential isn't nothing, it's something. Marcus links the idea of nothing to potential. He says that zero is the possibility of something. But this seems to be an unjustified logical leap. He's imposing ideas from outside of the concept of nothing, like imply and possibility and something. But nothing has no potential. It doesn't contain or imply any possibilities. It doesn't contain anything at all. And, as we've already said, it cannot even exist. We must already have the idea of something to get the idea of possibility. Nothing doesn't contain that. There is no logical route to getting something from nothing. It's an absolute fact. There's no way of getting around it. So Marcus's account is flawed. The solution to this paradox is very simple. Numbers must begin with 1, not 0. It's very easy to imagine how the number line in mathematics could evolve from the number 1. We just add more ones together and we get the positive integers. We take ones away from each other and we get 0 and negative numbers. And this all makes perfect sense and it's non-paradoxical. And this is the only logical route to deriving numbers. Numbers must originate in the concept of 1. So why do modern mathematicians insist on a paradoxical account of number evolution that begins with 0, instead of using a non-paradoxical account that starts with 1? Well, I assume it's because the pre-existence of the number 1 is an undesirable situation for them. If they say that numbers all derive from 1, then that begs the question, where does the number 1 come from? And logically, this is directly analogous to the question of if God exists, then where did he come from? And it turns out that it is impossible to account for the existence of the number 1 or God. This is just the way our conceptual framework works. Concepts have their own rules and logic built into them, and they simply do not allow for an explanation for where these things came from. There's just no space in the algorithm or in the structure to explain those things, so they are necessarily unknowable. Conceptually, they must always have existed. They must be eternal. The number 1 is basically the God of mathematics, where the word God can be interpreted as the provider. The number 1 is the great provider of mathematics. It is eternal, inexplicable. It is the origin and creator of maths. And Christianity and some other religions say God is one. It says that in the Bible. But those religions can't give a satisfactory explanation of what that really means, or why God should be described by that word. The fact is, it is conceptually inevitable due to the structure of the conceptual framework, which was not created by mankind. We didn't create all concepts. Sure, we created some, but we built them from the building blocks of fundamental concepts which are an intrinsic part of the universe. The universe is made of information, and concepts are the building blocks of information. Just as the laws of physics pre-exist humanity and all matter, they can only be discovered and not invented by or changed by humans, and those fundamental concepts are the same. So it seems that the quest to explain the universe as coming from nothing, it's an ideological aim. It's not really science. It doesn't make sense. It's not rational. So it's not science. It's ideology. Atheism and materialism have somewhat degraded science by imposing these desires to obviate God, and it has resulted in a degradation in the quality of science and mathematics. There is only one possible logically coherent method to explain our existence and the existence of the universe, and that is the prior existence of a God. The universe can only exist in a mind. There is no other logically coherent, non-paradoxical way to explain its existence. And that is actually a complete logical proof of God. If there's only one possible answer, then that has to be the right one. It's a commonly held belief that you can't prove the existence of God by logic, but the UP does show that actually you can. And this is how you do it. You prove the existence of God by showing that it is the only logically coherent way to explain the existence of the universe. I'm sure that, there are many people out there who will say that there are other possible explanations, such as the bang crunch eternal universe, the steady state universe, these kinds of things. But these are actually inconceivable ideas. It's not conceivably possible that matter could have existed forever. But, obviously that's a bit of a long conversation. It requires some justification, and we're not going to get into that in this video. If you're interested, please read my books. They're linked in the description below, and you can read them for free. So that'll do for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff, and that'll be great. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.